Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to go over some common feedback that I got regarding the MyPy connector or the MySQL connector in Python, specifically in regards to insert statements running correctly within either Spider or whatever script that you have running, but not actually showing up in the database. So let's get started. So the first thing that you need to understand is that the MySQL that you write with the MySQL connector is different than the kind of different than the one that you use when you use the MySQL client. So for example, if I were to just, here's a database within MySQL that just has one table that's called test insert. For example, if I describe this table, you can see that there's just two fields, a string ID, a table ID, and a string field. And I can easily say insert into values one and hello, for example. And then you can notice I don't need to do anything else. And if I try to do a select all from the table, so a select insert, you can notice that it's already there, right? So there was no commit that was required. I can do whatever I want, and this value will always stay there. So for example, for anyone who's familiar with normal SQL, you have to commit changes to the database, which is kind of just like a fancy word for saving. But when I write things here, I don't need to do that. So typically, if I were to make an error, like let's say something like this, and I got a syntax error, if I were to go select from the table again, if the auto commit feature wasn't on by default, this value would go away. So that's kind of what happens when you use the MySQL connector. So yeah, so I made this quick little PowerPoint to kind of describe what's going on. When you're using the connector, anytime you're using a DMM command, which stands for data manipulation language, anytime you use any of these commands, so like an insert, a select star, or delete, you have to actually commit your changes after executing, because then it saves the changes to the database. You can do a series of DML commands in a row and then commit it, but at the end there always needs to be a commit. Compared to DDL, which is data definition language, which is just the structure of the database of like how data should be saved in the database. Anytime you do any one of these commands, it's saved automatically. I won't go over DCL and TCL commands, only because they're not really relevant for this video. I can if anyone's interested in them, but I won't in this case. So what does it mean that the order kind of here matters? So if I take something like this, just a normal insert command, let me go ahead and delete here, so that way you can see the database is empty. If I go ahead and delete everything from the database, all right, and then I come back to my script here. So what you can see is this is a very basic script. All I'm doing is opening a connection to the database, creating a cursor, running the same statement that I had before, except now in a script. I'm executing the command, and then I'm closing the connection. And so when I execute something like this, and then I come back to my database, you can see that nothing's there because I never committed it to the database. So the simple solution to that is you add a singular line here, that is the MariaDB connection.commit, and then this commits all of the transactions that are executed before the statement. So that way when I run something like this again, I can come to my database and see that the statement has made it successfully saved or committed to the database. However, I can do a few other things. Let me delete this one again. Oh, delete star, silly. Okay, there we go. And now this is deleted and my database is empty again. We can verify that by running this. So what I was saying earlier about the difference between DDL and DLM commands is that the order here really does matter and dictate when things are saved. You can do a series of normal insert statements or select stars. You can do or select whatever you want in a row, And if you don't commit the changes, then they're actually not saved to the database. However, if you do a series of inserts followed by one of those DDL commands, it will automatically save everything up until that point. So what do I mean by that? I think the easiest way is to show you. So in this case, let's modify this a little bit. So in this case, what I want to do is, as you can see, I remove the commit command, and I have two commands now. First is a DML command, and the next is a DDL command. And so you can see here that first I'm executing the insert, and then I'm running just a create table, so to create a secondary table that looks identical to the first one. So just so you can see, I can say show tables, and you can see that there's just the test insert table. And what I want to do is I want to make a second table that's identical to the test insert. Okay, so after I execute this, you'll notice that it executes correctly. And if I come back and do the show table command again, you'll see that there is the DDL command executed successfully because I have my table there. And now you can also see that it committed or saved the first change, the DML command. That's because the DDL command occurred after the DML command. If, for example, I were to swap these and execute this again, let me delete that and put everything back to how it was. So here you can see the table's gone and my test insert table is empty. If I switch the order and I run the DDL command first and then the DML command, you'll notice that my test insert table is empty. But my test2 table was created successfully. So that just goes to show that if you're doing a series of DML commands, that's fine. You can do as many as you want. Just make sure you commit the changes. Anytime if you were to encounter an error and then try to recommit them, the error, I mean, normally you don't do that in a script. It's more when you do it on some type of interface with the database. But if you do an error, for example, there's a series of rules that apply to databases. So if you try to commit something, and let's say you commit 3 lines, or you insert 3 lines in, and then you have an error, the error is rolled back. And there's a lot of very complicated things that go on within MySQL and Oracle databases, which I'm happy to cover if anyone's interested. But for the series of this video, just know that if you're ever executing a DML command, such as the one in this column here, make sure you commit and you actually run the commit state. You execute a commit command within your script, so that way everything is saved to the database. If you're using DDL commands, you don't need to commit, but make sure you just have the order right. So if you try to do 3 DML commands, 2 DDL commands, and then another DML command, everything before the first set of DML commands will be committed successfully, but the ones following the DDL commands will not unless you commit them. I know it's kind of a strange way to think, but you just kind of got to get used to it. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to let me know.